Honey, look at those beautiful clouds.
Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
Put the rumors to rest. Gotta help the children and give it the best can. Stand around and be blind to the fast can. Taking no more, how can we relax? I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you cry. I just wanna see you smile. Baby, I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why? I don't wanna see you die. I wanna see your smile, baby. Living on earth, we must respect the earth. Human and animal, we all deserve the right to peace and opportunity. But nowadays we are blind, we can't.
Well, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio for another weekly update. It's June 7th, 2014. We have Russ Tanner with us today. As always, thankfully without Russ, we wouldn't have a show. He takes care of all the technical end, and Richard Sachs with us also, bringing his perspectives to the table. It's getting hard to keep up these days. There's so much coming at us, and a lot of people, unfortunately, have shut down with so much stressful news flying at them. But I hope this changes. I hope people simply decide what's the priority and focus on that priority. As another week goes by, we see the insanity in Ukraine still going on, innocent civilians being bombed. Thankfully, Russia showing unbelievable restraint with the three-ring circus created by the U.S. and NATO countries, completely unjustified. The whole world is seeing it for what it is. We have now the power structure being pushed further into a corner with China and Russia's $400 billion energy deal in non-dollar denominated trade. This is, again, the beginning of the end and probably a rapid end for the dollar. So we have these geopolitical events going on, the quest for energy and the acquisition of energy, thus the reason for all the Middle East insanity in recent years, all really leading back to 9/11, because we see that was really the license to start the U.S. imperial adventures abroad in earnest. More news, thankfully, surfacing on 9/11, more people willing to start speaking out, come out of the shadows, and it's not hard to connect these dots. We go back to 9/11, or even before 9/11, the PNAC, Project for a New American Century, stated on the record, short of a, quote, Pearl Harbor-type-like catalyzing event, the military-industrial complex would not be able to carry out their agenda of militarization and expansion. So there we have the new Pearl Harbor, which is 9/11, the license to invade countries at will under the guise of, quote-unquote, terrorism, and here we are. We have resource wars going on all over the globe. So in the meantime, as the climate engineers continue to sack the planet, quite a few things happening around the globe that our media doesn't report on. Simply they grab some drama out of a hat and press on. So in China, and even the Chinese media did not cover this almost at all, that China lost some 250,000 homes from flooding. That's kind of a newsworthy event, one would think. Massive deluge, record deluges there. Going back to another part of the globe, Greenland, and we had 10, this is a headline, 10 kilometers of ice lost from, it's a hard one to pronounce, Jakobshavn Glacier, this is in Greenland, in less than 1 month. Now, let's put this in perspective. This is also part of the headline. How large is a cubic kilometer? Think of something the size of a mountain. Now multiply that by 10, and you end up with a veritable mountain range. Think of it, an entire range of ice. That's a good rough comparison. This is right out of the headline again. To the volume of ice lost from just a single Greenland glacier over the course of a mere 26 days. So another very significant event not reported. We have in India, something else not reported here. Major heat wave already results in loss of life for 2014. This is also from the headline I'm quoting directly. As early as late March, the heat wave began to build over the Indian subcontinent. The heat surged through the state, setting off fires, resulting in a growing list of heat casualties, shutting down the power grid, spurring unrest. Meanwhile, impacts of India's agriculture were already growing as the lychee fruit crop was reportedly to have suffered a 40% loss. The final line in this headlines is by late May, temperatures across a broad region had surged above 105 degrees, shattering records as the oppressive and deadly heat continued its grip. Another headline, another paper, New Delhi hit a new record high for the day, 45 degrees centigrade. That's 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Forecast for New Delhi on Saturday and Sunday show the potential for even more extreme heat, with temperatures projected to climb to over 116 degrees Fahrenheit over the coming 10 days. And it goes on to elaborate that disaster. And their, quote, cool down is dropping down to 109 degrees, still record temperatures. So on to Antarctica. Or excuse me, we're in the Arctic now. Arctic sea ice loss goes vertical. This is a very recent article. Area the size of Nevada gone in 1 day. Try to get your arms around that. An area of sea ice in the Arctic, the size of Nevada, disappears in 1 day. This is the rest of that headline. The white reflective barrier protecting our northern polar region from the heat-amplifying effects of human-caused warming. And again, this is where the climate scientists neglect the elephant in the room that is climate engineering, which makes their discussion in many senses illegitimate. But nevertheless, the ice disappeared, even though they're not acknowledging this other factor. The headline continues. The ice took a severe blow today. The National Snow and Ice Data Center sea ice measurement essentially fell off a cliff as values plummeted by more than 286,000 square kilometers. That's an area the size of Nevada lost in a single 24-hour period. A state-sized region flipping from white reflective cooling ice to dark heat-absorbing water. This is what people need to understand. As the Earth loses its albedo, as the cryosphere implodes, and it is imploding, you know, all the disinformation about this and all the off-track headlines, off-track stories from different places are going to be very hard to sustain for much longer. I mean, it's so glaring, the amount of meltdown going on around the globe, it can't be hidden much longer. And the reason this has value is it hopefully will bring our community together, the anti-climate engineering community, that needs to realize that indeed the planet is in meltdown. To deny that is it's no different than the climate science community denying climate engineering, which is also very, very unsupportable at this point. So anyway, hopefully this will bring these two camps together as certain realities become inarguable. Now we're going down under nature, human destabilization, Antarctica capable of glacial outbursts contributing to sea level rise of 14 feet per century. And that's the important part of that headline. This is later than the headline that initially said a total of 14 feet locked in. This is 14 feet per century. They're inching a little closer toward reality. Again, these climate science articles do not include the massive decimation being caused by climate engineering, and that makes them, in some senses, illegitimate by not telling the whole truth. But nevertheless, the reality on the ground is there. The cryosphere is imploding, and that's my point. Now, if we press to another place down under, again, more headlines that we're not told. The last 2 years in Australia have been the hottest ever recorded. There is no sign that the heat wave is going to stop anytime soon. A report released Sunday showed. According to data compiled by Australia's biggest crowdfunding campaign, the Independent Climate Council, the period from May 2012 to April 24th was the hottest 24-month period ever recorded. Next month, when the 2-year period spans from June 2012 to May 2014, the above-average temperatures are expected to be even greater, the report says. Important to consider this, that this is the 350th straight month where global temperatures were above the 20th century average. It's the 38th consecutive April of above average global temperatures. So it's important to look at all the data. That's what I'm saying. When they're engineering snowstorms around the globe, when they have chemically engineered ice floating around on the Great Lakes and lots of headlines from that, even though it was 85 degrees on the shore, the climate engineering is making an already bad situation exponentially worse. And if we can stand on solid ground with all of our data, those of us that are trying to fight climate engineering, and that is my only goal, then we'll have a lot better chance of, at some point soon, hopefully, getting the climate science community to find some courage, address the elephant in the room that is climate engineering, and to help bring it to light and help recognize. And we do have a couple of reports out in last week, by the way, peer-reviewed reports stating clearly on the record what we have said for a decade, that climate engineering cannot work. They don't admit that it is not working because they're not quite brave enough to say that yet, but we now have a peer-reviewed report that says climate engineering cannot work, and this is what we've said for, again, the entire last decade. The consequences exponentially outweigh any perceived benefit looking at it from any direction. So right now, and this is important to consider too, with all these records I just mentioned, it's much worse than any of this data indicates because they are lying about temperatures. We're seeing it now in California and every place else we check across the continental U.S. The official daily high reading is 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6, 7, and 8 degrees, the official reading, less than the actual temperature on the ground. We see ice nucleating of everything. Had reports yesterday on, yesterday or Thursday on yesterday, the USA Preppers Radio show with Vincent Finelli, great guy, super strong ally in the fight against climate engineering. Encourage people to listen to his show. That a caller in there with a very strong Patriot website that's also helping the fight to mention the fact that he had filmed. I don't want to mention his name in the air. I'm not sure he wants me to, but that he had filmed the snow coming down at 50 degrees. Just happened. They're ice nucleating everything we see. Any significant moisture in the northern U.S., even still, they're nucleating the clouds. Again, this causes a lot of the hail to be bigger and more frequent, even though there's a canopy over the top of the storms. And this is common now. You don't see a break in the clouds and see the sun beaming through. You just see more white. They're spraying over the top of everything. On the radar, we see these convective cells bubbling up on the radar, but all around that, all you see is white scattering in every direction as they're aerosolizing that moisture and using that for a pump, if you will, to spread these particulates as far and wide as they can to create the largest toxic aerosolized cloud they can possibly create, apparently for the reason of creating the largest sunscreen they can create. Because as they continue to decimate the ozone layer, and it's getting worse by the day, our UV readings continue to go up, they apparently are trying to spray more to compensate for the damage their spraying is doing in the first place. How much sense does that make? It makes no sense. None of this, I mean, you can't rationally look at this situation and make sense. And maybe to them it makes sense because they're certainly poisoning the entire population slowly but surely. Our cognitive ability is waning by the day. So there's a lot of things that for the power structure I'm sure makes perfect sense to them. But the fact that they're sinking the entire ship, which they're also on, that can hold no rational basis no matter what. Have a little audio feedback, Russ. I don't know if you can catch that there. It just went away. Again, we see that aerosolization going on everywhere. In California, we see a lens effect where this light layer of spray, and this is really important because I've heard from so many people in California and Oregon in the last week or two that think the spraying has stopped. It has not stopped. The sky is very, very aerosolized. If you put something up to block the sun so you can see the aura of haze around it, the silvery white skies, they are absolutely spraying. And these short, bright trails we see are still spray. We have temperatures in Northern California pushing 110. No way in hell we should be seeing anything out the back of an aircraft or a condensation trail. And these short, bright trails, sometimes of different color hues, indicating they're probably dispersing different materials. But these are certainly sprayed disbursements still, and the silvery white skies prove it. And if you look toward the horizon in the morning, skies are white. Russ, a big audio change. I don't know if I'm still on right now. Russ?
Dane, your audio is perfect. I'm not sure what you're hearing, but you sound perfect.
Boy, it sounds like somebody's picking up the phone and listening on this end. Maybe they are. Maybe they'll learn something. So anyway, my last point, I want to bring Russ and Richard on, that we have a lot of spraying going on in conditions that people don't otherwise associate with spraying, and it's very important for people to understand there's a lot more to the aerosol operations than just the horizon-to-horizon trails, much, much more. And when you see these semi-blue skies and you see jets going by leaving a bright trail that disappears in maybe a minute or two, still aerosol operations going on. Don't confuse that fact. When you have these scalding summer hot temperatures and you still see these trails coming out the back of jets, that's not natural, period. So anyway, back to, I want to, we have an issue that could blow up on our face any day, aside from all the climate issues that are unraveling, and I think as the coming weeks and months continue, people will clearly see how much damage has been done to climate, and I think that argument will fix itself. And that way, if the power structure ever tries to sell us climate engineering as a quote-unquote cure for this global meltdown, people will already know that it's anything but a cure. It's part of the problem, probably the biggest part of the problem. So, Richard, I want to ask you, because I know you're following this, I'm going to jump back to the situation in Ukraine right now, because that could blow up any day, and it's directly related to the waking up and the spraying, which we are seeing. People wake up. It's subject of conversation with a lot of non-choir groups that we hear from now. They're all talking about it. But as that curtain gets pulled back, the power structure's under more pressure. It's pushed further into a corner. The dollar's starting to collapse.
Looks like we just lost Dane. Dane's having some problems with audio, so let me get Dane back on the line here. So bear with us for a second. Richard, you want to talk about? Can
you hear me okay, Russ?
Yeah, we just lost you completely, but you're back on now.
Yeah, it's happening a lot lately. I was on with Dr. Rima and her show, and with General Bert Stubblevine in Chile last week. It happened for 10 minutes, and it seems to be happening every show. But bottom line is, Richard and Russ both. I'll start with you, Richard. On the situation in Ukraine, more volatile by the day. I know you're following coverage on this. Your take on when they're going to really push things to the point of World War III?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think, my impression, and I'm certainly not seeing the whole inside picture, is that there's a constant reevaluation moment by moment with huge staffs that are modeling public reaction and how all these chess pieces and the moves fit together, that, the orchestration will happen depending on how they gauge public opinion. But I think this is an illustration, and there's other reasons too. There's so many great points you brought up, Dane. One of them is certainly people should not be under the impression that the reason for all these invasions by the U.S. directly or through NATO are in the Middle East because of needing energy, because this is a long story, but if you go back to the work done by Lindsey Williams, who was on the inside of a lot of big oil meetings starting in 1972 and 3, that the energy that was available on the North Slope of Alaska was consciously squashed in 73 so that the U.S. would not become energy independent even with oil, and that the Middle East invasions could be justified in the longer-term plans. So there's no way that the U.S. government is there because of energy. And this is all leading toward consolidation of global power, and again, the implementation violently, when necessary, of Agenda 21, and people really should be educated on that. That was one of many important points you brought up, Dane.
Aside from the energy aspect, though, Ukraine it's still about resources, I think, on many levels. I mean, Ukraine has some of the best farmland in Europe, and I think now the rush for food is certainly clear, or farmable, arable land. You have China really overrunning Africa, and the U.S., of course, has been there for other resources for a long time. The difference when China moves into a region, and not that I'm pro-Chinese government, I'm not, but at least when they move into a region, they come with a carrot and not a stick. The U.S. comes with the barrel of a gun.
Usually the U.S. government operates by bombing as their policy on a lot of things. But remember that these are not governments just all panicked about what to do for more food and more resources. These guys are destroying the food supply intentionally every day. And the U.S. government is pushing GMOs as fast as they can, and they're not stupid in the sense of having no idea what GMOs do. They're pushing all kinds of chemicals that make the soil sterile, and this is something that I've got a long background in. They are not trying to increase any food supply or the available resources of other kinds for the populations.
No disagreement for me on that. Again, I probably should clarify. It's not the fact that there's arable land there is not necessarily to increase a food supply, but to prevent anyone else from their food supply. And so this fits with what you just stated. You know, if they can control that land, they control some of the food supply for those that they consider adversaries.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, we've seen the control of farming and food supply and agriculture going back a long, long way. I mean, this was used by the violent communist regimes, by Stalin and other people, and they don't want private ownership of any food-producing land by anybody. And lots and lots of people were starved by the communist regimes in the past by just stealing their farmland and throwing them into dense cities. And this is a precursor, decades early, of what's planned on a global scale under Agenda 21.
Russ or Richard, have you guys seen any of John Kerry's several recent spiels? You know, I can hardly stand to look at the guy. I really can't. I mean, the level of utter hypocrisy and criminal tyranny coming from these people. And I'm looking at a headline right now, Obama blasts Russia intense call with Putin over Ukraine. Here we have, you know, Obama that's shown just as much hypocrisy as Kerry, and you know he's a good orator. Granted, you know he can really put a line out there and make it sound convincing. But you know, I never thought I would feel more disdain. I never thought I could feel more disdain for Obama than I did for Bush. But now I do.
No, Obama has really succeeded in surpassing Bush tremendously at this point. Not just in the intentional economic damage, which was not some kind of unavoidable mistake. It was step by step put into place. The banks were given bailout money that was then made into a debt on the people, and the protective trade barriers that used to be necessary to keep industry alive in America were all replaced by misnamed free trade agreements that absolutely guaranteed the destruction here and in the countries where they misused the cheap labor. So it's not being done trying to fix any problems. They're totally focused on destruction. And as far as somebody like Kerry is concerned, and so as to make it clear that it's not partisan, other people like John McCain, you know, these are clearly criminally insane people that are kept in power exactly because of that, and they fit perfectly with the agenda, so they're doing their jobs really well.
In certain elements on the destruction, I mean, I certainly agree with you that in regard, for example, the farmlands in California. I mean, they're not letting it rain here, plain and simple.
Right, they could do that anytime they want.
And they have, and astoundingly, again, even though I've tried to sound this alarm for 10 years here and said it was coming, and now people that are experiencing it, that know this is going on in our skies, and they're still going golfing on Sunday. They're still, you know, watching football games and tailgate parties and whatever else they do, and it's astounding. You know, while the water's coming over the deck of the ship, literally around their ankles, they're still completely distracted. And I hope this changes, but I would argue the power structures agenda is not going according to plan in certain respects, and that's again back to the ice right now. And this is people will see that this reality is exactly what we have felt it was for a long time. The ice in the Arctic right now, the graph for surface area, is in a straight down trajectory. Where that will go from here, we don't know, because typically, and this is what we've seen in California in the previous several years, we were projected to have temperatures, if we go back 2 weeks, we were projected to have temperatures quite, you know, cooler, at least or more toward normal, in maybe the mid-80s. But then, as more dire news surfaced from the Arctic, we've seen this over and over again. Then all of a sudden, our forecast changes here in California, and now we're pushing 110. We've seen the same thing year after year, where the mechanism they use to try to sustain what ice is left up there, part of that is frying us. High pressure dome over us, jet stream through Alaska. Same pattern again. Same pattern. Jet stream up through Alaska, and the east stays cool, and then they pick up moisture from the Gulf, pump it up north, and and try to ice nucleate some more to keep the little slushy going up in the Arctic a little longer. It's happened over and over and over. Whenever there's bad news out of the Arctic area, obviously the implosion is picking up in earnest. California goes back under the magnifying lens that literally fries the hell of us. And I don't even like to go outside anymore. I've lived outdoors my entire life. I don't even like going out. You can't stand in the sun. The trees are literally transparent. I mean, you can see right through. There's no canopy anywhere. The sun just streams through because they've got half their foliage or less, and there's not much life going on outside at all. And it's just too intense to stand in the sun. It's killing everything, and yet people don't get it. But I would back to the agenda. As the ice is in a straight down trajectory, if in fact that continues, no way in hell they're going to hide that. Can't hide it. And at that point, back to the pushing on Ukraine and really ramping up the agenda, I think that they're really being pressed into speeding everything up. They're not ready for what's happening. They didn't prepare for certain things happening at all. And I would argue they're realizing what a corner they're in as well, and that makes them particularly dangerous now. I mean, if the power structure's back into a corner and becomes extremely desperate, does that not make them more dangerous still? Richard? Russ?
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that, but I think where their fatal mistake comes in is that they have underestimated the two things. Well, underestimated one thing and overestimated the other. The thing that's underestimated is the reaction of the Earth that's coming for all of this. And Dane, you've talked many times about the reaction in a positive way that we need to allow. But there's a reaction, on a negative sense that's coming very soon, and it's probably starting already, but just a little bit from all the misuse and abuse that the Earth has been subjected to. And I know many people think it's kind of humorous about these silly people that consider the Earth to be a living organism, and they make fun of the Gaia, philosophy or religion and all that. I'm coming from a healing perspective, and a consciousness perspective, and I do see the Earth as completely conscious and wide awake and alive, much more than humanity in a way. And I see this reaction as coming up, and they don't foresee it. And the other thing that they've overestimated is their ability to hide from what's coming up. But as far as the global catastrophe in climate and other things that's going to be not possible to hide, they do know that, and they're not trying to keep it permanently under the covers, because they have a detailed plan of what to do when everybody agrees that it's really bad, and that plan does not expose blaming geoengineering. Yes,
I'm sure they won't blame it, but I hope to have enough information out there where people will take that into account at that point, that will have immunized them from any ability of the power structure to sell climate engineering as a cure. And speaking of Earth as Gaia, as a living organism, and I fully agree with you, when we consider the human body that has, depending on the study you look at, between 40 to 50 trillion cells in the human body, independent cells all working together to form an organism. And what is the difference really between that and the planet? And these cells, if you take them out of this organism and you put them in an environment where they should live, in a petri dish, but they have no function anymore, they're no longer able to perform the task that they were assigned, they die. That's a fact. Right. They die. So the intricacy of this web of life, its interconnectedness, is beyond what we can comprehend. I mean, how do our 40 to 50 trillion cells, Smithsonian I think rates it at 37.2 trillion, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is, how do they all work together to make us? And, I mean, the big factor that's been overlooked is consciousness, and humanity as a whole, especially arrogant leaders, consider that anything that doesn't look just like a human being must be dead, and that's not exactly accurate. Hey, Russ, I know I'm kind of excluding you out of the conversation here. I'm not meaning to, amigo. I'm curious. I don't know if you had a chance to look at any of the trees in your area, Russ, and I'm curious of yours, Richard. I mean, ours, a tree is a good canary in the coal mine for what's coming for us, and our trees look horrible here in Northern California. What do they look like out your way, Russ?
Well, what's interesting is I've been watching the trees here since before they grew their leaves this spring, and there's a certain percentage, it's not a huge percentage, but it is a noticeable percentage of the trees never grew leaves. And that's something that is really interesting that I've seen here this spring. I know also when I was in Maine last summer, we saw a lot of this spotting. There's a lot of reports going on all over. I hear about this all the time where the leaves have these brown spots, like somebody sprayed acid on the leaves. And we see that here as well. So it's it's a nasty situation overall. We definitely do see the impact of this that this is having. So and that's besides the fact that some people can. There's a growing number of people who do smell and taste this every day in the air, who are coming forward and admitting that they do taste and smell this, and it never goes away. So we're definitely seeing the impact here.
Well, trees also, a lot of people don't take this into account, but they have a respiratory system as well, of course, and they have stomata, which is the pores in the trees that allow this respiration to occur, and the intense UV shuts that down. When they can respirate, they're taking in the same materials we're all taking in. Here's a few headlines. We'll go to calls here in a minute too, Russ, by the way. In fact, why don't you read the call number, then I'll read a few more headlines.
Sure, if you want to call in, the call-in number is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296, and I'll go ahead and put this in the chat room right now for those who want to see it.
Thanks, Russ. Here's a few headlines, recent headlines. Trees and foliage dying and sick and mutating worldwide. Another headline, world's biggest and oldest trees are dying. And still more headlines, world's biggest trees are dying, alarming increase in death rate. I just came from the redwoods, and I was really sobered by their appearance. And as I've mentioned, my dad was an arborist, and I've been around trees my whole life, and they look shockingly bad. And how some of the park rangers there, when asked about the condition of the trees, have this sort of I just drank the Kool-Aid look on their face, and they say, the trees are fine. I think I mentioned in an earlier show, one biologist, Forest Service biologist I spoke to when I was there and asked her about the tree mortality. She says, oh, no, we have lots of trees. And it was sort of response you might expect from maybe a 5-year-old, and astounding. This is happening around us right now. We have marine life washing up dead everywhere. We have birds falling out of the sky. There's no insects. I just spoke to George Barnes yesterday. He's driving, from Skyder Alert. George Barnes, for those that don't know who George is, and he was on a long road trip between different filming events. And the point he made out, he had 3 bugs on his windshield for 600 miles of driving. There's no bugs. There's very few bugs. I mean, there's some out there, but there's very few. And this should be the writing on the wall for people, absolutely. So anyway, this. Let me know if there's any call we need to grab, Russ.
Yep, we have calls. Yep.
Okay, let's take one right here, and we'll roll from there.
That sounds good. Caller with your phone number that ends in 35. You're on. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Who's this?
Yeah, my name's Yvonne, and I'm calling in from Connecticut. And I just, first of all, want to obviously thank you guys for all the arduous and hard work you're doing in a field that is really thankless but super, super important. So I guess not thankless because there's people who are waking up every single day to this, as well as the myriad other issues that kind of come along with waking up to the fact that things aren't exactly as we're told every day by more mainstream sources.
Insanity, no question, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what I find interesting and just wanted to mention is that I guess I could say I woke up, as people say, at some point in the middle of 2012, and when I did, it was more to political issues, I guess you could say, and other aspects of socio-political corruption. And what's interesting about that is that I have a friend, his name's David, and he runs the Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole radio show, and he has a page on Facebook for chemtrails in Connecticut. So as I woke up to all these other issues, I noticed that there's a real quickening with it. It brought me to you guys. It brought me to listening to things about chemtrails, and kind of within a few months, now here I am listening to this radio show. And so I just want to thank you guys for that, and also ask you if you have any advice as to what we can really do now. How do we, I'm in Connecticut, I have a regular job, I'm a mom, whatever, but how do we mobilize? What can we do?
this is important. The question comes up over and over, and this is my take, and I probably haven't explained it completely adequately, although we have links on GeoEngineering Watch, activist suggestions, and so forth. We have to fight this battle from behind rocks and trees. We cannot win in the conventional sense or in the way that people have proposed of a straightforward assault, lawsuit against the establishment, and so forth. Now, such activities would be good in the sense that they help raise awareness, so I'm not against that at all. But the only way this battle can be won is from the inside out, and that means the U.S. military and people within the military become ally with us. It's the only way we can win. We need our military brothers and sisters on our side. And the only way to do that, because the media will not allow that to happen, we have to do it, which means everyone, everywhere, in whatever location you're in, you have to start and tend spot fires of awareness. You have to reach out credibly and effectively to those around you in your particular region, the groups, whether it's a farm group, ag group, outdoor group, whatever. Get them credible data. And once anybody that's sane, once they know this is going on, they'll join our fight. If they're not sane enough to figure out the impact of them, they're not going to be any help anyway. Move on. But if we all start these spot fires, again, fighting from behind rocks and trees, if you will, not lining up like the British and big groups, it's impossible to maintain that kind of a fight given the diversity of our ranks. But if we all move the ball forward where we're at, don't wait for somebody's instructions. Just look for these. You can look for these basic directions that we have on GeoEngineering Watch, but then take the ball and start to run with it. Start spot fires in your area, and the more spot fires we start, pretty soon the whole landscape's going to be ablaze, and pretty soon that's going to merge into a level of awareness amongst the population that cannot be extinguished. It cannot. So all of us everywhere, a lot of people are waiting for some big organized movement. That's not going to happen, or at least not yet. But in the meantime, all of us can start these new fires of awareness with those around us that don't have a clue, and there's so many who don't have a clue. Well, one huge example, and I want to give of this recently, this is going back 4 months, 5 months, Go Green radio show announcer Jill Buck, incredibly sharp woman, and she's a former military veteran, very environmentally minded, had never heard of climate engineering before about 4 months ago, and Jill Buck then took the time to fly to L.A., joined us at the conference at LAX for George's film to get another award there, and she's very dynamic, very engaged in the fight, and I never had a clue. I spoke to also last Sunday, I met with a government employee whom I know, who is closely connected with an Air Force major general, who told him that all the Air Force pilots know this is going on. Well, that doesn't surprise us, but it's interesting to hear it from a fairly direct source. So if they know, what are they being told? That they're doing something for the common good. We need to raise awareness to the point where they realize what they're doing, and I hope any military personnel that are listening, what you're doing is not for the common good in any way, shape, or form. It will deprive your children of a future. It will deprive all of us of any chance for long-term, perhaps even short-term survival. So wake up and do what's right, not what you're told in this case. And so we need the military on our side, period. So again, back to your original question, from the inside out, raise awareness efficiently, effectively. We have links on GeoEngineering Watch in the top left, the Flaming Arrow letter, which you can use to send out, that's already drafted with links on it, and the activist suggestion sheet. We all need to move the ball forward in our individual locations and raise awareness until they can't hide this issue anymore. And these climate issues I keep bringing up again and again will help to expose climate engineering. It's bad news in and of itself. No Arctic ice is very, very dire news, and we're probably headed for no ice this summer or next in the Arctic, not Antarctica, the Arctic. But it will help us expose climate engineering. So the more seeds we plant between now and when some of these events can't be hidden, the more likelihood we'll have a critical breakthrough of awareness. So that's the long answer.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I think that, I've been on a truth mission for something totally unrelated, somewhat unrelated, which is just Sandy Hook research and research into the truth there. And so I've come against a lot of the same issues that a lot of other quote-unquote truth movements come up against, which is needing to do that. When you talk about the spot fires, you need to just keep putting it out there, and no one can wait for a leader in this. We're not going to have some type of organized thing.
We all need to be leaders. All of us.
For all leaders. It's equal. Yeah, it's going to be an equal responsibility on this. And I just thank you so much. And I'm going to really start to work with David to try to mobilize some people here in Connecticut and get things moving.
Thank you. And the difference between climate engineering and say Sandy Hook or 9/11 or anything else, and all of which are important issues, the climate engineering is there happening still today, every day. It's not an event that's come and gone. It's worsening by the day, affecting more people by the day. So it's harder for people to just ignore it, deny it, and move on with their lives. They can't. Once the seed's there, it starts to gnaw at them. So anyway, let's all keep sounding the alarm. Russ, thank you for the call.
Thanks, guys.
Great, thanks for the call. Yeah, phone lines are open. If anybody would like to call in, we would love to hear from you.
Richard, on that type of, that approach again with the system, the establishment, if you will. And I know because I barked up that tree. I mean, I've been in Barbara Boxer's office. I've as I mentioned, the meeting I had recently with the Lieutenant Governor. I've been in EPA meetings, and this whole system is filled with people that are simply, to a large degree, afraid to speak out right now. Although that's changing. That's definitely changing. I mean, there's people inside these agencies that are now trying to get data to distribute to their peers. This person I just mentioned, who's connected with the Air Force high-ranking officer, I just passed on droves of material to that person that's going to end up in the airbase, I think. And these kinds of spot fires is what we need to wake the people up that are facilitating these programs.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I also agree that although things like Sandy Hook come from the same source and they're symptoms of the same real issue, and fortunately Sandy Hook's being exposed as a complete fraud where nothing of the kind actually happened, and that's being well exposed now. The bigger danger to humanity, which I know now it's supposed to be called climate engineering, that's the latest term after geoengineering, but it's far more than that. And the reason, just the climate could wipe out life on Earth if it's destroyed this way, but it also is a mechanism, as you've mentioned many times, Dane, for dumping any kind of drugs, chemicals, poisons, anything else that the power structure wants directly on our heads, and it's very difficult, to go out and get your own air. There's almost nothing else that can get to you, regardless of your decisions, as the spraying that's right over your head.
And I would back you up, Richard, in saying that, because there is a type of spray that has a certain scent to it that when they spray it for several days at a time, everybody starts getting sick. So the idea of dropping biologics on people, I absolutely 100% believe with absolutely no doubt that it's already happening. You
know what's going on. It's just a mild form at the moment compared to what they could do.
Right. I mean, I've seen incident after incident when this particular type is sprayed, and it causes me to have particular symptoms. It has a very particular odor and scent to it that I can detect, and other people as well. When they do it 3 days in a row, everybody starts coming down with the flu. If they do it a week in a row, they start shutting down schools. I've seen it happen over and over and over again, and it always coincides. And they try to tell you, this is going around the schools, that's why it's spreading. No, it's not. It's airborne, and it's being dropped on us now.
Yeah, and this has nothing to do with climate. I mean, it's not even an unavoidable side effect. It's definitely intentional.
Exactly.
I want to mention, for the people who, when the threat, obviously, for everything you guys stated, which I also agree with, I mean, clearly the biological testing, we would be absolutely naive, beyond comprehensive, not to think this is going on. We have pretty clear proof that it is. Clifford Carnicom's done some great work in this regard. The people who are still so willingly saying whatever they're told, certain meteorologists, we just had a pilot that went on the record for some news agency that was stating that, well, he was a pilot, so he knows this is just contrails. We're now making more progress in exposing these people through the Disinformation Directory website. Excellent work by the people involved, and I don't know, Doug Diamond, I hope it's okay if I mention his name, and he's done a great job. Russ is helping tremendously with this site, and also, I hope she doesn't mind, but Corey Gunnels from Arizona is helping too, and I think there's some other people coming on board. My most sincere regard to all of you guys, because I haven't had time to really engage in that. I'm too inundated with other tasks, and that work is so important because these types of people do not like to be exposed, and we had some very, very exceptional exposure done with some of the work for you guys I just mentioned on the site, and once these pages exposing them are prepared and posted, then the mail goes back to them, showing them that they've made the disinformation directory. And I have not met any of this type of people who don't react very strongly to that type of exposure. They hate it. So anybody listening, if there's a meteorologist in your area, or somebody of professional notoriety that is openly and blatantly lying about the climate engineering issue and trying to publicly hide it, that makes them accessories to the crime, literally. So send us a link showing what they said, who they are, where their email is, and we'll post on the disinformation directory to continue to expose these people for what they are.
And Dane, just so it's clear, it's disinformationdirectory.com, so people know how to get it.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you. Yeah, all one word, all lowercase, disinformationdirectory.com. And I encourage everybody out there to look through the site, and when you have extra time, find somebody on there that's exposed, that said something that bothered you in particular, and send them an email. Tell them what you think. That's the point. Their emails are posted there so you can rattle their cages.
Dane, I also want to mention a question that Yvonne had about things that you can do. It occurred to me after I sent you guys a copy of the letter that I got from our so-called representative out here telling us that, the spraying isn't happening and we should not be paranoid and just relax and go to sleep, that everybody, if you want something to do, write to all of your so-called representatives and ask them what they're going to do to stop the toxic spraying and the geoengineering, the climate, engineering and all this stuff, basically the metal and the poison coming out of airplanes overhead, and see what they send back. And if they give you a letter back like the one I got that Russ, you and Dane should have copies of now, those are all candidates for this site that would fit right in.
They are. So, if we can be forward emails for contacts for those people, that would be great. And again, my most sincere regard to Doug Diamond and Russ and Corey for helping with this issue, and any who would join them, assist them in this. This is a very important aspect, exposing these kinds of people, and not the trolls. I want to stress this, that we're not putting disinformation sites on there. Different category completely. The disinformation sites get ignored. Don't feed the trolls. That's what they survive on. This is a different category of people. These are people who are professional trades. Again, we had a pilot, meteorologist. There's a professor from Essex University that we just did quite an expose on. She was obviously paid to spread propaganda, so we exposed her. But so we're not posting disinformation sites, if you will. Everybody should learn to totally ignore those sites. Don't post them. When anybody posts a disinformation site on my Facebook pages, I have to delete it. I'm not there to advertise for the disinformation people. That's all they want. They don't care in what particular context they're exposed, so long as they're exposed. So if we really want to help the cause, don't expose them. Don't post their sites. Don't spread their sites. Ignore them. But on the flip side, if there's a meteorologist or somebody in that category who's lying, expose them, because they don't like that kind of exposure. So,
and Dane, isn't this exactly how you're going to break the power structure down in terms of stopping all of these people from working together in this crime? Is when you have social pressure, you've got the public, and think about it. I want people to think about this. If some meteorologist gets 5 or 6 phone calls, he knows that every phone call represents 100 or 500
exactly.
people who are thinking the same thing.
Yes.
So make that phone call.
It's a great point, Russ, and that's why for anybody who can take the time to get on the disinformation directory and go through some of those sites and just send them a short but pointed letter. Why are you lying for the establishment? And we're not. It's not okay. What you're doing is not okay. I don't care if your job depends on it or not. And here's another good point for those listening or people in professional positions. I know people in the USDA and so forth that are so in denial. I brought this up in a former show. They can't even, the USDA higher up that I ran into about a week and a half ago couldn't even really look me in the eye, because he knows that I know he knows. And he's too spineless to stand up and tell the truth. And that's not okay. And their jobs that they're trying so desperately to defend and protect are not going to matter very, very soon. Not going to matter. We've all been lied to on a scale that defies comprehension. And when you have, and this is an example I brought up before, but again it's important, the largest scientific panel ever created in human history, the IPCC, on any subject, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that doesn't even put climate feedback mechanisms into their modeling, i.e. methane release, the gassing on the seafloors, no acknowledgement of climate engineering. What is that panel? What's it about? What's it for? It's simply a paid disinformation mechanism. And there's conflicting interest there. I'm not saying all those scientists in that panel are completely disingenuous, but they don't lack, or they do lack courage, and they don't seem to show much moral fortitude in standing up or speaking out, and that needs to change. And some of those people are simply disinformation, but to not acknowledge climate engineering when it's so blatantly obvious, it's a strange society we live in. Truly, it's hard to imagine this could be going on in front of everybody's face, and there's just this blanket denial. But what I'm pointing out is the immediacy of our situation should be recognized by those who look at the data, and it's not off on the horizon. Even though we see all these headlines about different things that are going to happen in 2020 and 2030 and 2040, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in that manner. I don't know what kind of reality we're going to face, but the notion that things are going to continue as they are is a very naive notion, and that notion is going to be shattered soon. So,
well, Dane, one thing I'd like to point out is that to the urgency of this is that I know more people who died the year after, for 1 year period of time, the year after the spraying started in the town I lived in, than in my entire life combined, the entire previous life combined and doubled. People died and got sick at a rate I'd never seen before. I have a friend who, during a very heavy spray day in the South, works at a state office. 3 people had strokes in her office on the same day. And don't you know that small particle aluminum can accumulate in your capillaries and cause strokes? And this is the immediacy of the situation, because these diseases are being attributed to natural causes. I don't think they're natural at all, and it's very, very widespread. And this is why these people cannot remain silent.
Well, they're completely unnatural. I mean, again, as you and Richard outlined earlier, I mean, we're under full-blown, all-out biological assault day in, day out. I mean, how else can you describe it?
People are dying every day of diseases that are induced by this. Heart attacks. When you put barium in the human body, it lowers your potassium so quickly that it can induce heart fibrillations and eventually a heart attack in mammals. In fact, barium is used to artificially induce heart attacks in laboratory animal testing. That's why it's so dangerous. And people are dying every day right now.
Again, yeah, every metal is dangerous that we know of that is in this mix, and then combined, synergistic toxicity kicks in. There's much, much more lethal still. So yeah, people are dropping like flies now, and the true lethal mix has not been dispersed yet, which they could disperse any point in time, and it's game over for all of us. So again, those people listening, especially those who know people in the military and so forth, the people in agencies, it's not okay to sit the bench on this. It's not okay. To sit and watch a crime happen that you're sort of facilitating is not okay. And if we have any chance of extending our survival on this planet, this issue has to be brought to light.
One other interesting thing I wanted to ask you about, Dane, is we were talking about the biologics earlier, and I told you about how when they spray 3 days or more at a time, everybody starts getting sick. It's interesting, the last few years, they started having mainstream news articles talking about all the bacteria that's in the upper atmosphere. I've never heard anything like that before. Is that...
There are bacteria. I mean, you have syringae, which is a bacteria that's responsible for a lot of the precipitation conditions and so forth. But now you have Popular Science, as they admitted on the record recently, that they found samples of E. coli at 33,000 feet. And in the Popular Science article, and I mentioned this before on the air, they were really scratching their heads as to how the hell it got there. And we know that E. coli has been used and experimented with as an ice-nucleating element. We know they're ice-nucleating the clouds. They don't care what the fallout is. We know that. So is this a part of what they're scattering around our skies? They're just using whatever organism that might assist them in weather modification, regardless of its consequences on the ground. Why would we think otherwise? So, again, this is why all of us that are focused on this issue exclusively, this is why we are. Because there's nothing in regard to life-sustaining mechanisms on the planet or our own personal physical health. There's nothing in this whole equation that's not being horrifically assaulted day in, day out by the climate engineering, period.
Yeah, and Dane, this is how they have seen them work, is that just like all of a sudden I started seeing all these articles on the bacteria in the upper atmosphere, which I'd never heard of before. I've been focused on the sky, reading, writing, researching about sky-related articles all my life, jets, I've never heard this before. And now, all of a sudden, all these articles, it's the same way like when you have the trails across the sky. I'm not a young man anymore. I've watched the sky all my life, and I want the young people out there who are listening to this program to listen to us, that you're being taught in your textbooks that these trails are water vapor, and it's a lie. My entire life, I've never seen a trail come out of a single jet in my entire life, unless you're at an air show where they do it intentionally. Never was a trail coming out of a jet. Also,
unless, Russ, if I could qualify that, unless somebody happened to see something to do with weather mod, because that does happen. I answered a question this morning from somebody who talked about pictures from going back to the 50s and seeing trails. Well, two things in that regard. This is important for people to consider. One, when you had some of the very old primitive engines, be it the piston-driven engines especially, or even some of the early jet engines, very crude, very inefficient, put out a lot of particulate matter, particles, which are also capable of creating, it's a particulate trail. And it's not condensation, as you said, Russ, in that case. It's not condensation in the sense that we're told. It's still a particulate trail, even then. And also, this is even more important, we know the weather mod programs existed then. We know that. We have the patents. So it's, if someone has a picture of a condensation trail going back to the 40s or the 50s, what they call a condensation trail, we don't know what that was, but the chance that it was just pure condensation is very small. And again, whether it's a primitive early engine, be it jet or piston-driven, that puts out a lot of particulate matter, that is the same as the particulate trails we see now, which are heavy metals, or whether it was some form of early disbursement and weather modification, you can see these trails given footage and photographs going back a long way because, one, these programs existed then, and two, some of the early engines did put out particulate. But as you've so accurately shown and elaborated on, the modern jet engine, high bypass turbofan jet engine, is not conducive to any such trail. And so what we see are particulate disbursements.
Right, and I would qualify it the same way. When I'm saying that is all these big jets, all big military and commercial jets, all of them use high bypass turbofans. Even the 707s, which were originally fitted, they're older jets introduced in the 60s, had low bypass turbofans, which had a little more potential to create a trail, although it was so rare you would probably never saw one in your lifetime. The high bypass turbofans just simply don't create trails. And this is what I want the young people today to realize. You cannot believe what you're reading in your textbooks because it's just outright propagandic lies. We do have a caller if you want to take it, Dane.
Let's take one real fast. Caller, make it short if you can because we're almost out of time.
All right, caller.
Real fast. Hi, guys. It's BJ. They're trying to normalize people wearing oxygen now. You know, I've been on it for 2 years now, and my daughter picked up on it. I don't watch television, but she saw it on one very popular show and on a promo for a new movie coming out. She picked up, I said, well, and she said, they're trying to normalize people wearing oxygen now. So it just blends in with what you just finished talking about.
Thanks for mentioning that, BJ. And I'll elaborate that a little further. They normalize everything now. Having asthma is normal. Having COPD is normal. Getting Alzheimer's is normal. Having a child with autism is normal. People need to wake up. I mean, this is an all-out assault, period. Every day matters in this fight. And as we run out of time right now, I want to stress, and elaborating on the first caller's question as well, all of us can move the ball forward. Wherever we're at, whatever situation, if we have a computer or even if we don't, you can still get data from somewhere and know enough about what you're speaking to that you don't come off as being off the wall or fringe. Have some knowledge, better yet, have credible data to pass on. Do it efficiently, effectively, practice your skills in this, and start spot fires of awareness everywhere. All of us can do this every day. Move the ball forward every single day. Thanks for bringing that up, BJ. I know we're just about out of time right now, but again, this is...
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, BJ. Most important conclusion of the show. Not much out there is truth right now, Russ, as you just said, on many fronts. And the bottom line is right now people are going to have to learn to sift the baby from the bathwater, figure out what's really happening, what's not, take your compass heading every day, and help us spread the word every single day. Sound the alarm. Wake up in the morning. Every morning when I wake up, I decide, how can I put another dent in the armor today? What stone haven't I turned over? What contact haven't I made? Every day, figure out how to move that ball forward. It's up to all of us. Richard?
And it affects all of us, Dane, is that in my years of research, alternative health research, I discovered something really fascinating, is that basically almost all the disease we have today is artificially created. I mean, most of the disease we have is from man-made issues.
It's a true circus of insanity.
Yes,
Rush,
it is.
Richard,
Yes,
thank
it
you
is.
for the show.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. This is GeoEngineering Watch Radio. We're on the air 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time every Saturday afternoon. On behalf of Richard Sachs and Dane Wigington,